What are esteemed Carlotta's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. For starters, we've absolutely got to discuss how Carlotta is an insanely powerful DPS. Like, she is strong, brother. Ever since her release, she has been heralded as one of the best possible DPSs that you can play in this entire game, if not the best DPS. There was some debate around it whenever she first came out, but I'd say that at this stage, it's pretty clear-cut how insanely strong she is. She is a cut above the rest, without question. Let's take everybody's favorite Magistrate of Jinzhou, Jinshi. She is a very powerful unit, even by today's standards. Trust me, I will always be one of the first people to defend Jinshi's modern meta position. However, at this stage, I can definitively and confidently say that I think Carlotta's a better DPS than her. This puts the esteemed Montelli Lady a cut above the absolute cream of the crop when it comes to the 1.0 cast. She's also so strong to the point where you can literally brute force stages with her, even if they're not really made in her favor. For example, let's say TOA currently has Glacio resistance upped by 10%. You can still use your freaking Carlotta there. And I say that as somebody who plays her on Static Mist, not even her signature weapon. That should just go to show how strong her power baseline is. Now obviously, you're not going to be able to use her against Sentry Construct, but outside of those absurdly bad matchups, you're able to brute force basically anything with her, because that's just how much damage she does. It's ridiculous. It genuinely doesn't take that much investment in order for her to start hitting the ground running, but when you do pour that investment in, goodness me, have you got yourself access to one heck of a nuclear bomb. Whenever you use her, you're gonna realize that she seriously lives up to her name as the Montelli family's executioner, because oh boy does she execute enemies absolutely mercilessly. She's been one of the best DPSs in the game ever since she came out, she has only continued to prove that she remains one of the best DPSs in the game, and now that her rerun is coming up, she still remains as an extremely safe investment to make. Sure, we do have other powerful DPSs in the game right now, such as Absolution Phoebe and Zani, but even with those meta behemoths being around, Carlotta still retains her seat among the rest of the S-tier DPSs. Another thing that I should highlight is the fact that pretty much anybody can access this crazy amount of performance out of her. She's really not that hard to use. Once you learn her core rotation, you're able to fire off a lot of damage. You see, some characters are great, but they're only great if you're really able to put in the effort to learn them. For example, Chang Li. If you're willing to plan with convention and put the effort in, then she is one of the most high-value characters that you could add to your account. But if you're not really good at fast inputs, or you just don't really want to learn Quick Swap, then Chang Li's gonna feel like a total waste on your account. This truly isn't a concern whatsoever for the esteemed Montelli Lady. You could be a complete and utter casual when it comes to how you execute your team rotations, and still get a lot out of her. This makes her one of the best available pulls to anybody who really wants an easy DPS to play, while still being able to access top-of-the-line damage. I should also add that her skill is able to freeze enemies in place for a brief period of time. This is actually quite comfortable. It's not for a super long period of time or anything like that, but it's nice because it offers you a brief moment of respite, and can keep enemies in place if they're the type that move around a lot. And that's another thing. Carlotta is excellent when it comes to her range. She's able to shoot enemies from really far away whenever she's in her ult state. This makes her feel like an absolutely fantastic choice when you're trying to take on very movement-heavy enemies, whether that be Crownless, Thundering Mephis, or any other boss of the sort. This degree of usability is sure to satisfy pretty much anybody that decides to give her a shot. Speaking of which, I should comment on the fact that she is absolutely insane when it comes to taking down boss enemies. Her single target damage is very, very high, and her kit was generally designed around the idea of fighting one enemy at a time. Because of this, she feels like one of the best possible characters that you can use in the TOA, considering that the hardest content there is always boss-based. So if you're facing trouble in that game mode, then let's just say that this esteemed executioner may be the one for the job. And as for holograms, those things are gonna wish that they were never even digitally born the moment that they see her approach. She is easily one of the most comfortable characters to use in that endgame, and considering that holograms are the hardest content in Wuthering Waves, I'd say that's pretty nifty. And considering how one hit from a boss can completely end your run, I actually think it's very nice that she's able to freeze enemies in place with her skill in such a situation. Because while it's certainly nice to have it in the TOA, it definitely feels a whole lot more useful when you're up against holograms. Assuming that the boss that you're facing doesn't have some absurdly high Glacio resistance, there is a high chance that simply throwing Carlotta the enemy's way is going to solve all of your problems. Genuinely, she is like an instant win button. If you're ever struggling with any sort of content, you bring out the Montelli Lady. I mean, hey, that's basically how her own family uses her, right? So if you're in need of a character with some absurd single target potential, then you might want to consider giving this Mafia Lady a call. I'd also like to mention that she has some excellent team options. You see, whenever she was coming out, a lot of us, including myself, were under the impression that she would really need the silly painter Jojo. Now I will not deny, she does really enjoy her company. I mean, hey, she's an art investor, it only makes sense. However, it will be wrong of me to say that she doesn't have excellent team options in general, because she actually does have quite a few substitutes, all of which will help you clear quite well. For instance, no Joja? No problem. You can still use Yang Yang. Her outro skill is able to provide some energy to whoever the incoming character is. This helps in covering for the absence of Joja's I4, meaning that you do in fact have a free-to-play friendly team option. You can obviously always use Sanhua due to how universal she is, especially considering that she's able to provide some attack percent at S6, but there's nothing really in particular that she's providing Carlotta, outside of just being a very good universal teammate. But it works, so I'll bring it up anyway. And of course, then there's Chang-Li quick-swap teams. Yes indeed. If you're somebody that wants to play a more complicated Carlotta team, you can actually achieve that with Chang-Li. And if you enjoy this team, you can entirely skip Joja altogether, because that team's actually able to reach some really impressive heights when it comes to performance if you're able to execute it well. Keywords, if you're able to execute it well. That applies to pretty much any team that features the one who can reduce you to cinders. But that's another nice thing that I'd like to throw in there. Hypothetically, let's say you don't really find the hypercarry playstyle all that fun. Well, no problem. You don't have to play her like that. You can instead play her like a quick swap unit. This does require you having the Phoenix Lady, but it's still cool that it's an avenue that you're able to take, especially because it's so different from her main hypercarry playstyle. And of course, I'd like to give Joja her flowers as well. Or I suppose her painting supplies. She's one of the easiest characters to use in Wuthering Waves, her outro skill is absolutely excellent for Carlotta, and she's also just a really high value support to have in general. Using the silly painter along with the Mafia Lady creates some insane results. So honestly, contrary to what we initially thought whenever Carlotta first came out, her team options are actually quite vast. Alas, as absolutely excellent as this Lady of Brilliance is, we do have to discuss her flaws. And I'm gonna be honest, there aren't really many. She is a very strong character, and I would like to highlight that these flaws, they're not really deal breakers. She's still one of the absolute best DPS pulls that you can make in the game in my opinion. However, I would still like to highlight these, as these are issues that will affect your gameplay experience. For starters, she's harder to use in Whimpering Wastes. Notice that I said harder. It's not that you can't use her, it's just going to be a little bit more difficult, for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you want her to feel good in Whimpering Wastes, you want to have invested in her quite a bit. This is because you want to be able to A, position yourself in a way where her death knells are going to hit as many enemies as possible, and B, you want her to be invested enough to the point where she's able to melt down enemy waves with singular death knells. This actually makes her pretty solid in the game mode if you're able to execute it correctly, because you're able to melt down waves pretty fast. So despite her being more of a nuke-based character, because of how her ult is segmented like that, you're actually able to make her work in Whimpering Wastes. But I would like to highlight that this is not really easy to do. You actually have to practice a little bit if you want to make it work. Now, if you're devoted and you do put in the time and investment, then yes, it will work, and you can quite frankly brute force Carlotta in every single game mode in the game. But if you'd like to save yourself a lot of hassle, I'd rather just go and get a character that's already good in the game mode, or is at least a bit better than Carlotta at a baseline. Because as we all know at this point, Whimpering Wastes isn't really about who can do the most damage, it's about who can do the best sustained damage over time to multiple enemy waves. That explains why characters like Chang-Li are so good in the game mode after all. Once again, I'm not trying to utterly discourage the use of her in Whimpering Wastes, because like I said before, with enough practice and enough character investment, it can in fact work. But if you're like me and have skill issue, then it's not really that good. And this ties into my next point. She doesn't really have great AoE. Now, outside of wuwa, there's not really any situation where this is gonna matter, but TOA is a very single target centric game mode anyway, and most of the time, you're gonna be using her in the middle tower, because that's where she performs best. But in AoE situations, once again, you're gonna have to apply some good positioning. Now, will she not work at all? She'll be fine, honestly, because once again, with good enough positioning, you're able to make it work. And of course, the higher investment that your Carlotta is, the better. But same as before with Whimpering Wastes, you'd rather just save yourself the headache and use a character that's naturally better in AoE. Personally, I think she's completely fine in multi-wave because of how her ult is segmented. That's not a problem at all. I'm specifically talking about AoE. This really isn't a deal breaker. I wouldn't put too much weight on this. It is an issue, sure, but it's not really some massive thing that suddenly turns the character into a D tier unit. It's more or less a small issue that you can work around. And besides, because of vigor management in the TOA, and how you want multiple teams for that game mode, you can always just delegate Carlotta to all of the single target chambers and you'll be fine. Genuinely, I think there is just a lot to love about this character. She's gorgeous, she's really cool, and she's honestly one of my favorite characters in this game. I love her playstyle, I love her animations, and I just think there is so much coolness here. She has absolutely stood the test of time in my opinion, 100% still worth getting. While I do think that getting most characters on their reruns do have some semblance of value, Carlotta definitely has more than the rest. She has 100% earned her meta throne. And so for those reasons, I 100% recommend her. But what about yourself? Are you gonna be getting Carlotta this time around? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturday, starting from 3 p.m. UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some more fun stuff together. Hopefully this video is able to tell you Carlotta's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out. And remember, Mafia Lady first, Meta second.